doesn't take a rocket science to know that when a mine, which used to employ 12,500 people, is closed, that is a reason for unemployment. Not this basa shop owner from Somalia and from Ethiopia and all of that.
You'd think these facts would settle the debate, but they don't. If evidence is so clear, why do so many South Africans still believe migrants are taking their jobs?
Because fear is powerful, and when people are struggling, it's often easier to blame someone than solve the real problem. But here's another question. Who benefits from that anger?
Exactly, because mobilization like what anti-migrants have achieved requires significant capital and influence. So who is driving this movement and why now?
You have politicians that have been facing elections and they know that just saying we're going to create jobs, the working class doesn't believe that anymore. So these politicians are now finding a scapegoat and of course pointing the working class in the most vulnerable amongst us.
The consequences have been real. Governments across Africa have brought citizens home because they no longer feel safe in South Africa.
And if you decide to, say, stay because you are living legally, paying taxes, raising a family, are you actually safe in South Africa?
That's the important question that we're asking today, because the truth is xenophobic resentment has been bubbling beneath the surface for years. Without addressing the structural root causes, a repeat of these tragic events is practically inevitable.
Only the working class of this continent can usher a true and a genuine African Renaissance. Unity, organization, and the struggles of the working class armed with the socialist program is the only hope that the masses of this continent have.
Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has consistently condemned the violence, but the condemnation alone doesn't make people feel safe. How do we permanently end this cycle of xenophobia?
And if politics isn't stopping the attacks, could organized labor do it?
Let's find out right here under the baobab. Hey.
I like it. Hey. Maybe it's always good to be back under the baobab.
Same
and
here,
right
Judge.
here at this particular table. And what is much likely to be so good is that I've been refilling my perspective and the drink feels so summerish.
Yeah, very, very summery.
I mean, and when you talk about summer, you know what we're talking about.
Right. I know what you're talking about, the summer jam, right?
Exactly. Mimi, of course, it is one of Europe's, and this to our listeners and viewers to appreciate, it is Europe's largest international reggae and dancehall festival, and it takes place just right here in Cologne. Cologne is next to our studios here in Bonn, Germany.
And I should say that our very amazing colleagues from the 77% were also there. In fact, they're always there every year.
Yes.
And they managed to get a special message from iconic artists for our Under the Baobab community.
Yes, and this is so lovely and very special for us, for the reggae and dancehall hardcore fans and newbies. We are talking about Chris Martins and Kimani Marley. Kimani Marley is one of legendary Bob Marley's son. And let's listen to this special message.
Bless up, this is Chris Martin, and I'm representing for Under the Baobab. You understand? Keep it locked, don't touch that dial. Martin, say that.
Yeah, this is Kimani Marley speaking. I want to say, Under the Baobab, keep the fire blazing. We need you in this time.
Imagine receiving such a, refreshing message from Kimani Marley and Chris Martin.
It's encouraging for the community. And if you enjoyed that, don't miss the 77% Summer Jam special later this month on the DW 77% channel here on YouTube. But today we have a very special show prepared for our community, Mimi.
So stay tuned.
Yes, this is Under the Baobab, and my name is George Okachi.
I thought you forget to introduce yourself. And I am Mimi Mefoneu. On this program, we always make Africa's complex issues personal and relatable.
Yes, we do that every week. We demand accountability from political leaders, from policymakers, and from experts. If these are the conversations you care about, we need you to subscribe to DW Africa and join us in the comment section. Some of your thoughts might even make it to the next episode, of course, as we've always promised.
I can see the pride in some of our viewers when they see us highlight their comments. So if you want to be remarkable for next or during next week's show, please comment, share your thoughts. So today's question is quite simple. If you're living legally in South Africa, should you still be afraid if you have legal documents? To help us answer that, we are going to be joined by someone very important, right, Josh?
Yes, we are talking about Mametulwe Sibei, the president of the General Industries Workers Union of South Africa, that is GIUSA. And Sibei is one of, prominent labor leaders actively confronting anti-migrant factions. He is here to discuss why trade unions have a massive stake in eradicating xenophobia, Mimi. I just wanted to get his perspective on how he deeply sees the problem.
The reason we have a crisis, the catastrophic levels of unemployment that we have is twofold. One is the massive jobs bloodbath because of the restructuring of the industry that has been happening over ages, right? When you look at agriculture, which used to employ over 2 million people in the 70s, in the 80s, today is employing less than 1 million. In the meantime, the population has grown. Manufacturing, that used to account for about 24% of the GDP in the 80s, today is somewhere between 11 and 14%, right? So they've basically lost up to 50% of their contribution to GDP. Mining used to be about 21%. Today is between 5 and 6%. This is a mainstay of South African capitalism. So these are labor-intensive industry that could be employing millions of people that are out of jobs today. So migration certainly has nothing to do with any of that.
Comrade Sibei, that is a well-established fact. So how do we shift the narrative from immigrants are stealing our jobs to addressing the root economic causes?
Xenophobia is not the natural and inevitable reaction of the working class. Like, it doesn't take a rocket science to know, for instance, if you are from my local or my rural area in Limpopo, that when a mine, which used to employ 12,500 people, is closed, another one that was supposed to be employing 8,500 is closed, it doesn't take a rocket science to know that that is a reason for unemployment, not, this pasta shop owner from Somali and from Ethiopia and all of that, right? You have politicians that have been facing elections and they know that just saying we're going to create jobs, we're going to be delivering of houses, the working class doesn't believe that anymore. So these politicians are now finding a scapegoat and of course pointing the working class in the most vulnerable amongst us.
And since we are speaking candidly about solutions today, who exactly are these politicians backing the anti-migrant groups?
Almost all the main parties are unified around blaming migrants in one or the other. Except, of course, the EFF, I think, is the only part that has consistently been challenging this, although in some instances is making serious concessions as well. These politics are right at the heart of the government of national unity. The victory in KZN, of the MKP, that is the party of former President Zuma, was on the basis of tribalism, on the basis of xenophobia, and that part today act as a main anchor of this movement, giving it the resources as well as capacity for the organization on the scale that we have not seen before. And that is the reason that it is no longer enough that the labor movement must be denouncing, it must be organizing.
Well, the parties that you're mentioning are not here to defend themselves, Sibei. But from your perspective, why has this anti-migrant narrative gained so much momentum?
When obviously you're a working class person and a poor person, and you are unemployed, your hospital, your local clinic, is more of a mortuary and a graveyard where people go to die than a healing or a center of healing treatment and care because of understaffing, under-equipment. When that is happening and you are not organized, it becomes more easier to turn on the poor and a vulnerable person next to you than to confront a powerful politician who is responsible for looting of your public hospital or a clinic, or to confront a CEO of a powerful multinational corporations that have monopolized the ownership of the economy, of the minerals, and the land in this country.
And yeah, what is the General Industries Workers Union of South Africa, which you had, doing to convince, the frustrated communities that fixing public infrastructure and not mass deportation is the cure for overcrowded hospitals?
So I'm trying to point out that the weakening of the labor movement is part of the problem, and that includes Kiwusa itself. Just in the past few years, in 1 year, we lost 500,000 membership. And it's that sense of weakness, of helplessness, that is responsible for the hopelessness and the despair of the masses that is being weaponized. And that's the reason we've got to rebuild our organizations. We have got to bring back political education, including the enormous cost and the sacrifices of the people of this region in the liberation of this country.
Well, you can't agree more that Sibe is a fiercely articulate pro-socialist crusader, and listening to him, I couldn't agree more that, of course, grassroots solidarity is needed to pressure the relevant authorities that actually solving the root causes is the key to solving the xenophobia, challenge.
Yeah, but I could also hear him saying that the labor movements have failed and that there's need for them to work harder.
Yes.
Because it doesn't make sense that for the past few years, they are losing members instead of gaining members.
That's
but
spot on,
also, let's try to lighten the mood a little bit, because that's what we do here under the Baobab, where we get to know the guests also on a personal level. It's called the Rapid Fire segment.
Which one will you prefer, ending xenophobia or SA winning the World Cup?
Ending xenophobia.
And what is one thing that people underestimate about Workers' Union?
Their power to change lives in a real way.
And which one do you trust more, protests or negotiating in a boardroom?
We have no choice but to protest, and only on the basis of struggle.
And what's your favorite drink, Amarula or Savannah?
Amarula is always the best.
What is Sebe's favorite city or town to visit in South Africa when you are not working?
Actually, I love Pretoria, and being at home in Limpopo, in my rural village, is always the best of my time.
In just one single word, how would you describe yourself?
Well, a revolutionary Marxist in a permanent state of social protest for justice, because I've a visceral hatred for any form of oppression.
What is your to-go to unwind after high-stakes union negotiations?
As I said, every opportunity I go to my rural area.
And finally, dine out or cook at home.
Yeah, that's the most embarrassing thing. I mean, I think I fantasize myself cooking, but quite frankly, I'm a disaster. At best, I can cook eggs and very few things.
Judge, you know how to embarrass our guests with this rapid fire segment. He was responding looking like...
Yeah, it is an embarrassing question, but a quick one. If you were to choose someone to be with, would you mind a man who cannot cook?
I don't really mind, because I'm a very good cook.
Okay.
So I don't mind.
I rest my case.
Yes, but the Amarula one, it's really nice. I've tasted that. So now, George, we've heard one perspective. Now let's test the numbers, because we always look at the numbers also under the Baobab. Thousands of people have already left South Africa. South African officials say that more than 30,000 have been repatriated in recent weeks alone. Just yesterday, the Zimbabwean government was saying that more than 21,000 people have left the country as well.
Yes, and this is something that our listeners and viewers must appreciate. The regional breakdown is telling, but how many migrants actually live in South Africa? That is the question many people are asking.
And this is what is getting more interesting. Despite all the attention, migrants still make up only a small share of South Africa's population. A survey that was, made public in 2023, that was a South African survey, revealed that there are about 3.1 million migrants in the country, and that is roughly just about 4% of the total population.
Yes, and does the number surprise you, sort of, Mimi?
Honestly, George, the numbers actually surprised me. And when you compare that internationally, I should say that South Africa has a smaller migrant population than countries like like the UK, for instance,
Yes.
with 17%, Canada, for instance, with 22%, and Australia with 30% migrant population.
Yes,
South
but-
Africa just has 4%. Naturally, George, anti-migrant campaigners argue that these statistics actually ignore the vast wave of undocumented arrivals, migrants who arrive in South Africa without documents. But South African officials say that their census methodology is designed to account actually for that.
Yes, that is given, and then we came across another, statistics that caught our attention, Mimi, and that is the World Bank found that every migrant, employed creates roughly 2 more jobs for South Africans.
And the economic logic behind that is straightforward. People spend where they actually live, and they rent homes, they buy food, they use the transport system. So that money that migrants earn circulates, within the South African community, and it benefits South Africa.
But given the context, I asked our guest, Mamitlu Esibei, whether his union actively organizes migrant workers and how they protect them. Here is what he told us.
We do. I mean, the treasurer of our branch here, where we are located, is a Zimbabwean. Obviously, the lack of documentation means more and more migrant workers are out of the union because they feel precarious, they feel insecure, and obviously capitalists are weaponizing that.
Well, you see, that actually brings me to the concern raised by the anti-migrant groups. And they are arguing that unscrupulous employers are deliberately hiring undocumented workers at low wages to exploit them and, sort of undercut South Africans. What concrete policies is your organization pushing to solve this?
Migrant workers, it's not true that they don't want better wages, that they don't want better conditions of employment. In fact, they are here precisely for that. So the reason that they are taking conditions that are lower is on the basis of irregularity and precarity of their position legally, which precarity is created by the state deliberately, not because they want migrants gone, by the way, but precisely because they want to facilitate accumulation of capital and they want to restructure the labor market to lower the conditions of the working class in general to boost their profits.
How specifically will your organization help resolve that exploitation?
We have got to be fighting for mandatory extensions of collective bargaining in many of these industries that are not regulated. The labor movement is weak precisely because of the brutal restructuring policies that have been facilitated and that are anchored by the state itself. So we cannot rely on the state. The working class must be reminded that it has to trust and rely on its organizations, on its unity and determination of our members and the working class to struggle. On that and on that alone, we must place our faith and hope and confidence in the future.
Imagine blaming migrants for all the country's problems, and when they eventually leave, the problems are not solved. I think Sibe is trying to say here that he actually believes that, it doesn't make sense blaming the migrants.
Yes.
Solving the root cause of this problem is, definitely the solution.
That's very true. And it is his perspective, and some will believe like that as well. But what do ordinary South Africans actually think? What is the immediate fix to xenophobic violence? We took to the streets to find out, and Tusokumalo did that for us.
The black working class, when I talk about the black working class, I'm talking about so-called foreigners. I'm talking about so-called South Africans, Nigerians, Ethiopians, all people who sell their labor. They must unite and make sure that they overcome this systemic arrangement in which is capitalism that always keep them oppressed, always exploits them, in which it owns most of the lands and the means of production.
It's not undocumented foreigners who are stealing the jobs. It's that the corporates in South Africa are not investing in the economy. We have discussions with economists who tell us that the big corporations, the companies listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, are hoarding millions, billions and billions and not reinvesting. Foreigners, especially the the spaza shop owners, the small shop owners, the tuck shop owners, they actually create some jobs. And some analysis shows that for every tuck shop that operates, four local people are employed. But that's on a small scale. The real big issue is to rejig the economy and look to the corporates and the multinationals that are not investing or hoarding the profits.
The only problem that we are finding ourselves in is a systematic inequality, where like there is a high level of unemployment, and who causes that is basically our policies in South Africa. The governments are signing the policies that are anti-workers. They sign the policies that favors private companies. Privatization is becoming so much a problem that we won't even have a solution. We said this before, I think during the xenophobic attack of 2008, to say, because even that time people were saying, no, there's no jobs and the migrants are taking their jobs.
It's great to hear, these thoughts from different perspectives.
And you see, Mimi, ahead of the June 30th, the infamous June 30th protest, there was a lot of fear and there was a lot of concern as well.
Right.
And it has caused a number of countries to repatriate their citizens from South Africa. And there are some, rightfully said, who have decided to remain. Yes, but the critical question remains for the Labour leadership. Do they truly believe that the state has done enough to guarantee safety for the migrants who choose to stay? Let's hear what Sibei told us.
Their actions have been nothing short of a catastrophic and a disastrous failure, but also a treachery and betrayal. I mean, this president, as an example, this is a man that owed all of his personal and political fortune to the mine workers. The great mine workers strike of 1987 that he led, that was a turning point in a struggle against apartheid. Majority of those workers were migrant miners. So it is really a betrayal at the most fundamental level that these workers who shouldered with us the burden of lifting the yoke of the white minority rule and apartheid are today an outcast, that are ostracized, but also brutalized with a kind of impunity that we have seen taking place.
And now, Sibei, while some nations have repatriated citizens, many migrants, I believe, remain in South Africa. What immediate security measures will your organization or union pressure the government and police to take to protect them from vigilante intimidation following the marches we witnessed?
In a build-up to this, we have had to have lots of meetings in many communities, by the way. And this was last-minute, improvised efforts, but there was lots of mass meetings. In many of those communities where they organized, there wasn't much of this kind of violence. And that's because the comrades are holding the line. They are the ones that were saying to our members, none of you should be participating in these actions. And in fact, as a union, we are against and denouncing this. Because it's only when we are organized that we can be able to speak as a united force in resistance against these xenophobic programs, to be able to make sure that we organize a mass defense of the migrants in every community. And I think that is a task, that is a challenge to the movement, to the trade unions and community civics.
That is his point on, Mimi. South Africans have to take this responsibility of, having a protective layer for the, migrants, because no country exists without, people or foreigners who come to support the economic development. Mm-hmm. And of course, to our listeners and viewers, one of our favorite parts of every episode is hearing from you. And we asked what your thoughts are about the whole situation. And as always, you gave us plenty of what you think about.
You certainly did, and we don't always agree with you all the time, but we appreciate your honest feedback. So let's start with one of the comments.
Yes, I will begin with Lean Ramdeen, who writes, not everyone in South Africa supports these anti-immigration movements. It's a political stance because local elections are coming up soon. Sad to say, but immigrants have become the target all over the world. She's talking about the US, UK, Sweden, Denmark have all been deporting immigrants.
That's a very, very important reminder. Even from the vox pops that we had from South Africa, we could see that not everyone, is supporting the xenophobic attacks that we are seeing. Sometimes it's easy to think that the entire country feels that way, but the reality is not. It's not the reality across the country.
Yes, and what Lynn is simply trying to say is that this is not only unique to South Africa, and around the world, migration has become a deeply political issue. Maybe.
In fact, we are seeing that with the World Cup that is ongoing at the moment. But we also have this comment from Osman Othman. Osman Othman says that my question is, how can an African be a foreigner in an African continent, in the African continent?
That's one of those questions that simply, are incredible and difficult to answer.
Exactly, because legally, countries, have borders. But emotionally, historically, many Africans still see the continent as one shared home.
Okay, finally, Echo Black says when an African
of comments there.
Yes, moves to another African country, his fellow black people sees him as a competitor running away from bad governance. But when a white man or Asian moves to those same countries, they embrace them and see them as investors and not running away from bad governance.
Whether you agree or you disagree with that comparison, it's clear that this issue touches on identity, economics, and how Africans see one another.
Yes, and that's exactly why these conversations matter. And we invite you to keep on, coming to us and sharing your thoughts with us.
So this conversation goes beyond South Africa. More and more people are asking, where is the Southern African Development Community, the SADC, in all of this?
Yeah, they have a huge responsibility. And after all, South Africa's migration story, Mimi, you'd agree, has deep historical roots. But they say also today's tensions demand today's solutions. And with unemployment still painfully high, all divisions continue to resurface. So what strategic solutions can SADC deploy to permanently resolve this regional impasse? Let's get Sebe's final thoughts.
There's nothing that is going to come out of that. Because we've got to be absolutely clear that the leadership of SADC and the entire African continent is bankrupt in the program to lift this continent out of the current misery, as the South African establishment is. What we need is a unity and coordinated struggles and the movements of the working class in this country, in this region, across the African continent, that can be able to take all of these elites out of power. Only the working class of this continent can usher a true and a genuine African renaissance. Absolutely no hope exists on the basis of this elite. Unity, organization, and the struggles of the working class armed with the socialist program is the only hope that the masses of this continent have.
And finally, what do you tell a South African graduate who says, I am not xenophobic, but I want my government to prioritize me first?
We need to unite, not to divide. Because when we were united in 2012 in the mine workers' strikes, we were able to improve wages of the mine workers from 5,500 there, now cost to company workers are earning 27,000. Over 300% increase. That unity is what we need to defeat unemployment, to make sure people have access to services. The moment we turn against each other, we actually allow politicians and, of course, the corporate elite to continue to get away with the swindle that has been happening in this country.
So today's conversation reminds us that xenophobia doesn't begin with violence. It begins with fear. And fear grows when problems remain unsolved. South Africa's working class is being challenged to start dismantling the economic systems that keep people divided.
And whether you agree with our guests or not, one thing is undeniable. This conversation affects millions of Africans.
Now it is your turn Do you think that labor unions can help end xenophobia, or should governments be doing more than what they are already doing? Tell us why in the comment section. We might just open next week's episode with your perspective.
If you enjoy thoughtful conversations like this, subscribe to our YouTube channel, DW Africa.
You can also listen to our other episodes, like the audio episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Until next week, keep questioning authority under your own baobab. My name is George Okachi.
We have one baobab.
Yes.
Right? Anyway, people should have their own baobab. And I am Mimi Mefonewu. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Bye.